You don't need training because you can use force under common law. Now, have you ever heard a statement like that or similar to that? Well, I've been doing what I've been doing now for almost 30 years, and I've heard statements like that in virtually every industry sector I've worked in, from healthcare to care to security to education. And you can bet your bottom dollar that someone somewhere is going to make a statement like that to someone within their career. Now, I want to come back and clarify this because that statement is not true. It's misleading and legally flawed, to be fair. But to do this properly, I first need to establish the difference between Statute Acts of Parliament, primary pieces of legislation, and common law. So let's start with what an Act of Parliament is. Well, an Act of Parliament, which is also known as primary legislation, is statutory law. And for something to become an Act of Parliament, it must have been passed through the House of Commons, passed through the House of Lords, and then be given Royal Assent by the Monarch. Now, an example of an Act of Parliament that we all know about is the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. That's the primary piece of legislation, being an act, for occupational health and safety in the workplace in the United Kingdom right now. And what that means is that you have to comply with the law because it's primary legislation. It is an Act of Parliament. And if you act contrary to that, that's commonly known as breaking the law. So where an Act of Parliament says you have to do something, you have to do it. Now, with regards to the use of force, we have Acts of Parliament that relate to that too. And there are two primary Acts of Parliament that relate to the use of force. One is Section 3.1 of the Criminal Law Act 1967, and the other is Section 76 of the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008. And both of those tell us that we can use reasonable force. So when it comes to the use of force, we have two Statute Acts of Parliament, as I've just mentioned, and we also have the Health and Safety at Work Act with regards to occupational health and safety in the workplace. Now let's look at the common law. Well, common law is made by judges and developed through the decisions of the courts. Now, the main difference is that statute law, the Act of Parliament, that dictates what the law is, whilst the case law, the common law, clarifies its effect and gives it meaning. So, when a case goes to court, the process, generally speaking, starts with the statute law to find out what the law says, and then they look at the relevant case law, the common law if you like, the case law judgments under that statute to determine what the scope of the law is and whether what is being alleged has been upheld or broken. Now, both the common law and the statute law are equally important, but statute law, being primary legislation, sits above the common law, meaning that judges must follow an Act of Parliament. An example of this can be seen in two primary pieces of legislation, two Acts of Parliament. One is Section 3.1 of the Criminal Law Act 1967 and the other is Section 76 of the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008. Both of these set out that a person may use reasonable force in certain circumstances, but what amounts to reasonable force has been clarified over the years in numerous case laws in various common law cases, so case judgments and decisions. So let's go back to this question that you don't need training because you can use force under common law. Now, as I mentioned, I've had a couple of people contact me to tell me that certain people in organisations are stating that staff don't need any formal training to use force in physical restraint, for example, in this case, because they already have the right to use force under common law. Now, as I've said already, the law, the statute on this, for self-defence or physical restraint or the use of force per se, it does arise in common law. However, many of the common law decisions have been incorporated into Section 76 of the Criminal Justice and Immigration Act 2008. Now, this Statute Act of Parliament now provides clarification of the operation of the existing common law and statutory defences. And as we already mentioned, we have another law that covers this too, which is Section 3.1 of the Criminal Law Act 1967, which is the use of force in prevention of a crime or making of an arrest. Furthermore, if someone is expected to use force whilst at work to defend themselves, protect others, defend property, etc., then the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 comes into effect. And the Health and Safety at Work Act is another primary piece of legislation. It is law and we have to comply with it. Now, under Section 2(2)(c) of the Health and Safety at Work Act, it is a duty that the employer provides the provision of such information, instruction, training and supervision as is necessary to ensure, so far as is reasonably practicable, the health and safety at work of his employees. So straight away in the Health and Safety at Work Act, the Act of Parliament, there is a provision in there that the employer must provide training, amongst other things, to its staff. In addition to that, the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999 provides further regulatory guidance to the Act, making employers responsible for ensuring that staff have the capability to do the job. For example, the regulations make it a requirement that employees are provided with adequate training. So this regulation that underpins the Act also says they have to have adequate training, and that any training should be repeated periodically where appropriate and be adapted and take account of any new or changed risks to the health and safety of the employees concerned. In summary, therefore, an organisation cannot legally not train its staff and expect them to act under common law and to use their own judgment and their own discretion in the absence of suitable and sufficient training. If they did that, they would be acting illegally. Well, I hope that answers the question. I hope that helps. If you wish to share this video, please feel free to share it. If you want to add any comments in the thread that you feel can add value to people who may be watching this video, please feel free to add a comment. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you want to like it, if there's a like button somewhere, I'll appreciate if you liked it. But please comment, please share, and if I can be of any further assistance to you, get in touch and let me know what you'd like me to do the next video on. Thanks ever so much, and I'll speak to you soon.